Well, welcome to the Freedom Side here on Breakthrough News. I'm your host, Eugene Puryear. Here, as always, this is, I guess, quarantine edition to some extent here. Myself and Juan in the booth. We're just back from Haiti as part of our Breakthrough News team. So we are joining from our homes. So excuse our dust. But as we always do here at the start, we tell you to take a little time and share this live stream so that everyone who's following you can follow us. And I think that this is a monumental time for you to share because we are very, very, very excited, honored. There's so many things I could say to be joined here on the Freedom Side for Breakthrough News by Rania Halleck, who has joined us here as our colleague on Breakthrough News. Rania, I mean, thanks for joining us, obviously, as a co-host here on the Freedom Side, but we are just so excited to be welcoming you here to Breakthrough News.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to join you guys. I can't even tell you. I'm like, look at the smile on my face, ear to ear. Yeah. It's so good
well,
to be
we
here.
Also have Monica. No, absolutely. Monica Cruz also in the house with us for a little bit as well from our Breakthrough News team. Juan and I are here. Sorry, Monica, I should have mentioned you earlier. I didn't want you to think I was leaving you out. As you can see, we have an all-star lineup that is here and ready to go. But, you know, as we maybe before we get into it a little bit, Rania, I think having you here, there was something that we put out earlier on Twitter and people can see there and go. And we hope to hear from you about things they want to see and hear you report on. So in the spirit of that, I just am curious from your perspective. I mean, what are some of the things you're really excited to report on coming in and joining our team here?
Well, obviously, you know, I'm based in the Middle East. I'm based in Beirut, Lebanon. And so I'm really excited to be able to get back to reporting from the ground in places like Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, on the situations in those countries, the geopolitical maneuvering of the US and the resistance to imperialism there, because there's a lot of it. And I think it's one of the most horribly covered regions when it comes to the way it's covered by the media. It's either ignored or it's, you know, covered terribly in the mainstream press, which really, obviously, we all know frames everything in favor of whatever US interests are. So I really want to break through those narratives and give people a lens into like what people's daily lives are like under US sanctions, how people are dealing with their livelihoods being destroyed by this, you know, maximum pressure campaign against Iran, which has continued into the Biden administration and is really touching every country in the Middle East right now and destroying lives. I live in Lebanon. There's an economic collapse there that is completely tied up with geopolitical posturing by the Gulf states and the U.S. against Hezbollah, again, in its war against Iran. So I want to be able to delve into that. I want to be able to, you know, bring people information out of Iraq. You know, there's a lot of resistance groups to the ongoing U.S. occupation of that country and trying to use that country as basically like a place to start a war with Iran. And of course, we only hear about that in the U.S. media as Iran-backed militias. So that's not what's going on there. I want to be able to bring people, you know, a reality check about that. So we have like a lot planned. I'm very excited to be able to get back to the kind of journalistic work a lot of people know me for. And also just, you know, to be able to do segments on what's happening around the world and in the US. But, you know, anyone who knows me knows that, you know, my biggest issue is imperialism and really giving people an understanding of how it destroys the world from an on-the-ground perspective. So that's what I hope to bring to you guys. Not that you're not already doing that. You guys have been doing a great job, so I'm glad to like add to the team.
No, well, I mean, it's a huge addition. And, you know, obviously tens of thousands of people know your work so well. We all know your work so well. So, again, really just honored to have you on board with us and very happy to have you along for the ride with us here on the Freedom Side tonight. So, again, if you're out there in listener land, I guess you can't say that, but out there in watcher land, take the second, share. Listen, Juan, we'll get to that. You know, share this live stream so that everyone who's following you can follow us. We've got a lot we're going to talk about here. Obviously, we're going to be getting, you know, very deep into what Juan and I were able to see and to witness in Haiti over more or less the last 8 days. But, you know, we've got the perhaps, you know, controversial now Monica Cruz with us here this evening. Very happy to have you. And we wanted to touch on another major issue for those who follow us at Breakthrough News on social media. at BT Room across all your social media platforms. You undoubtedly have seen a fantastic video that Monica put out responding to, some interview statements that were made by AOC regarding the issue of criticism of the Biden administration for not being progressive enough, and that kind of criticism was privilege, and the implication, or coming from a privileged position, and the implication being that it was also racist. So anyway, Monica, you've had this fantastic response. It's gotten huge virality. I think like 160 some thousand views I saw, and that was a couple hours ago. It could be more than that now. What has the response been, Monica, to your response?
Right. Thanks, Eugene. Well, I'll say first off, I was kind of nervous putting this video out there because I have not done a rant style, selfie camera type thing ever for Breakthrough. I've done it a lot in my personal life, on my personal social media over the years of, paying attention and caring about politics and being politically active. So the response has been incredible, right? There's always going to be the haters, the naysayers, the blue MAGA types. But, of course, there was a lot of support and a lot of people saying, thank you for speaking up about this. Thank you for giving this message, because I couldn't have said it any better, and because it needed to be said, right? And, the cesspool that is left Twitter, whatever, be that as it may, as Eugene might say, I think my video was speaking to a lot of the righteous anger that people feel in America right now, not only dealing with the material conditions that this entire profit over human lives system has created since the founding of this country, but also everything that this pandemic has exposed about the system, which we've covered time and time again on Breakthrough. But I think people are getting tired of the empathy performance that's being put on by a lot of folks in the Democratic Party and folks who call themselves progressive. And, I don't get mad about people, elected officials, using their platforms to speak up about the issues that they care about and to talk about the policies and the actions that they plan to take. But I do get mad when I feel like the struggles of our people are being used as a way to garner support. And when promises are being made, to hold this newly elected president, his feet to the fire, yet now folks are going around and, defending him to the T, sounding like a lot of the establishment Democrats that they've criticized, right? So I think this video and my take on AOC's comment in this particular interview is much more than just AOC as an individual. It's understanding that both parties are two sides of the same coin, that both parties are bought and paid for by Wall Street, and both parties are incapable of giving working class and oppressed peoples what they need in this country. And it's going to take a complete overhaul of this system to get any bit of semblance of liberation and real human dignity that we deserve and that we're fighting for. So that was really it, man. People can say what they want, but
well, I hear you. I think we actually may have some of the worst tweets available. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well let's see what we got here.
Let's pull them up.
Okay. What is that handle, first and foremost? Leftist CEO.
Is that a thing?
In a bio, it says they are a progressive CEO, an anonymous CEO. So yeah.
You can't say leftist and CEO in the same sentence. Come on. Who's this guy trying to
throw Rose in there?
I really have no idea.
This has got to be hold on. This character has got to be some creation of a troll, a bot farm run by the DNC. What they think a good can't be real. I'm convinced that guy's not real.
Yeah, that's unbelievable to me. That's like those Amazon people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Don't even get me started. No, I felt the need to bring this up because a lot of people were tight that I said it was a recent interview. The interview was done back in January 26th and it was released on March 29th. So recently released. Let me put that out there, okay? And next one.
Just nitpicking. They're nitpicking.
Yeah.
They're nitpicking. It's like they
Yes.
can't argue with the substance of what you were saying. So they have to like
Exactly.
take some little like thing under a microscope and be like, oh, you got this wrong. But you know, I loved what you did because it was like, it was so outrageous to see that interview she gave and her to try and say that people who are criticizing this administration are like privileged when some of the most critical voices, like you said, are the most vulnerable people. And I was so angry about that. And you just articulated it like so well. And I think that's why it spoke to so many people because, you know, yeah, it's been 3 months. I don't think of that as a short amount of time. 3 months is a long time. It's been 3 months. We still have kids in cages. You're still bombing the Middle East. You haven't reduced sanctions anywhere during a pandemic. Like, so little has changed other than just rhetoric. And it needs to be said and it needs to be shouted. And people don't want to hear, there's people who don't want to hear it. And there's also people who, and I think the other reason that so many people, this spoke to so many people is because so many people see AOC, especially on the left, as somebody who really is playing this role of like, of bringing those angry people back into the Democratic Party when we should be building outside of it. And she's kind of become an obstacle to that, right? Because like, that's what she's doing. She's pulling people back into a party, like you said, that's backed by the same people backing the Republicans, Wall Street. And so anyways, I love that video. I like watched it like 12 times. It was so good. And every time I was like, yes.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like when we were in Haiti, like people were saying Joe Biden, people were saying the Democrats. You know, it's are those people privileged, right? Are those people that are fighting a dictatorship privileged? Like it's very clear like who she's talking to. She's talking to whoever like reads that magazine. But when you're in a position like that, like your words go to everybody. And the majority of critiques that I've heard about the Joe Biden administration, like you brought up, is from like working class people. Like I don't.
That's right.
So yeah.
Well, people whose lives haven't changed. People whose lives haven't materially changed and aren't going to materially change under Joe Biden.
And people that were skeptical from the beginning. That went out and like knowing that it was not the answer for them, but did it as like as a survival tactic. But like, look, it's not even something that's being like progressive enough for working class people. How long did we have to wait for that stimulus check? And still, the second that they got in, it wasn't a $2,000 stimulus check anymore. It was $1,400. You know, they're telling Haitian not to come into the U.S. They're still putting kids in cages, but now it's not cages; it's detention facilities. So you know, yeah.
You know, and you know, I'm glad that you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say really quickly. This comment too reminded me of the 2016 and the 2020 election and all this rhetoric from liberals and Democrats of if you're not voting, that means you're privileged. And it's just like, you're telling me that the nearly half of American voters, we're talking about 92 million Americans and estimated, did not vote in this election in 2020. You're telling me that they are all just privileged and that they didn't vote just because whatever? No, they didn't vote because they saw two candidates who don't represent their interest and who they know are not going to bring exactly that progress that we're talking about here. So that's just really it. To me, it's also really offensive to say that, you know, to say what messages that's sending to Black and brown and undocumented people. I'm like, the Black and brown and undocumented folks I'm organizing with, I'm listening to, I'm interviewing on the streets are not happy with the Democrats and are not happy with Biden and have a lot more crazy, I'm going to control myself, crazy things to say than I had to say in that video.
It's a family show. Well, let's see what we have next here in terms of worst tweets.
I'm trying.
It's okay.
Changing no progress.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, someone should read it.
Sorry,
yeah. Let's all read it together. Actually,
that sounds like a terrible idea.
I'm gonna give it to Monica.
You're the host.
Yeah, Monica, read it.
Okay. Changing no progress from the question she was asked to not enough not progress enough is a pretty significant difference. Y'all are so capitalist in your hearts that you see anti-AOC leftists as a brand that'll get you clout, and you just really can't help yourselves.
Oh my
Okay, first off,
Wow.
let me get me back on screen when I say this. See my face, see my face. I'm a communist
okay.
at heart, bro.
Yeah,
Tell
She
him.
called you a capitalist. How could
Tell him.
Ouch.
Oh my god.
Clout
Oh my
chasing
God.
too.
No.
I mean, completely
But I
ridiculous.
know, cloud chaser, wow. But
Yeah, everybody
I mean,
knows
for
where all the
real,
money is. Everybody knows where all the money is, right? All the money is in being a leftist, one first and foremost. Everyone knows being a leftist makes you a lot of money. And on top
Yeah.
of that, criticizing the Democratic Party. That's where the jackpot's at, you guys.
I mean, really, it's the end of the rainbow. Where's the leprechaun? I mean, it really is just so unbelievable to me. I mean, the thing to me about all of these, honestly, is who feels so strongly about this? I mean, about the broader idea, as if somehow it's wrong to critique people. Like, you must always agree with everything that's said by AOC. You must always, give people time. You must all, I mean, it's the most ridiculous sort of framing of how people should relate to politicians, in my point of view, as if somehow like you owe them something rather than
Word.
they allegedly represent you. And if that is the case, you may not always like the criticism, but it's just like, we're going to die on this hill of anyone making a substantive critique against it as like a moral norm. I mean, it's just so outrageous on so many levels.
She's doing two things, right? She's gaslighting the left, first of all. And second of all, she's actually projecting, because their actual privileged people are people who are members of Congress who make $175,000 a year, have
get free
free
healthcare.
healthcare, right? Have free healthcare and are being taken care of. Moreover, the people who are agreeing with her are also some of the more privileged people. There are people who are comfortable enough that nothing really changing in a significant way materially for people doesn't affect them because they're okay no matter which party is in charge. I mean, let's face it, these are people that under Trump, they didn't suffer. You're not undocumented. You're not crushed under the weight of student loans. You're not being bombed by America or sanctioned by America. You don't have like a gig economy job. You're probably somebody that makes six figures and you're getting along just fine. You own a home or two and you're getting along just fine. Like, you have family wealth. Those are the kinds of people who are making this critique. And that's what's even more disgusting, because they're projecting their own privilege onto everybody else. And it's like, it's really frustrating. Like, that guy left as CEO. That guy left as CEO is a CEO. He's a privileged person. And it's like, those are the kinds of people who are taking what AOC is saying and then throwing it at leftists and using this really like this awful privilege discourse that, I mean, again, like, as somebody who lives, like you mentioned Haiti one, as somebody who lives in Lebanon, like, everybody abroad knows no matter who's in charge, it doesn't matter. America's America. They're going to keep bombing and sanctioning you. And it goes the same way for the working class in America. I mean, there's, of course, I'm not going to pretend there's no differences, right? But those slight differences don't affect people's wages when the Democratic Party won't even, pass an increase in minimum wage.
That's right.
Well,
that's that American exceptionalism Kool-Aid. Like, we're not connecting the issues of working people here to the issues of millions of people that we have more in common with than our own elected officials. So that's how people like AOC too are able to nab these phrases and terminology from the actual left, like AOC now this week on Instagram Live talking about an imperialism crisis while supporting deadly sanctions in Venezuela and Iran, and shaking hands with fascist coup organizers from Bolivia. So, that's that paradox. And I feel like progressives, left people, whatever you want to call yourself, if you care about human rights and human dignity, you need to start seeing how the US empire is destroying the lives of people just like us all over the world using our tax dollars. And we need to be challenging that.
It's so true. And
Well, I was just going to say about the imperialism thing. You wanted to show the clip of AOC? You mentioned the AO. Did you guys want to show the clip of her, or do we not have it? Sorry, I didn't know.
Do we have it? I don't know.
I'll play the audio.
Okay, it's worth hearing. It's very short.
Because it's not a border crisis. It's an imperialism crisis. It's a climate crisis. It's a trade crisis. And also, It's a carceral crisis because, as I have already said, even during this term and this president, our immigration system is based and designed on our carceral system.
Yeah,
So I think
there
it's
you
interesting she
go.
mentioned those words. I felt like she was kind of taking buzzwords that she hears people in whatever leftist circles she follows saying, maybe in very substanceless ways, and she just kind of threw them in there. She isn't wrong what she said, but if you're going to call out imperialism, you're a member of Congress. You're in a position to do something about imperialism. So like Monica just said, why are you shaking hands with Bolivian coup leaders? Furthermore, why aren't you standing up and shouting against the sanctions that are crippling Venezuela right now, that are literally stopping trucks from being able to deliver food to other parts of the country because they have a diesel shortage because the US has sanctioned diesel? I mean, this is like an outrageous war crime, in my opinion. It's like a genocidal war crime. You're preventing people in an entire country from getting food to collectively punish them because you don't like their government. Why aren't you shouting about that instead of just throwing the word imperialism out like it means nothing?
Yeah, well, and I mean, also unilateral sanctions are, not legal under international law. So it's certainly lawless, it's certainly rampant. Juan, get in there, and then we're going to leave AOC alone for now.
No, I was just gonna say,
so I'm going to give you the last word against.
Yeah, I just feel like it says a lot about who she's around, like what people she's around, like who are she's critiquing these people, but not realizing that working class everyday people are also having a critique of the administration. It shows how privileged she is, that she doesn't have to be in the middle of like East Harlem. She doesn't have to be in the middle of Harlem. She doesn't have to be in the Bronx and hear the critiques of working class people, right? Like people are still lining up for food pantries. People are still struggling on a day-to-day basis. That stimulus check wasn't enough. Have we heard about cancellation of the rent? Like that is not something that is happening. So if AOC did the door knocking she did when she was running for office, and she was to survey the community and ask them how does she feel, how the community members feel about the Biden administration after the couple months, everybody will tell them there's no difference. It's more the same. I voted. I don't feel like I've received anything for the vote. We were promised these things and we haven't received them yet. And there's always going to be like a wait and see, or it's only been this amount of time. When a year of the administration has passed, they're going to say it's only been 1 year. And the thing is that she was saying this, and Monica mentioned that in her video. She was saying that not that long ago when she was when she endorsed Bernie Sanders. But now she's in coalitions. She wants to look good in front of people. She's already sold out her people.
She's a politician.
Right?
She's a politician.
Yeah. She's more worried about the Vogue magazine. She's more worried about like showing up on TV shows than she is about working class people. And like all of these folks that are on Twitter are the same people that are giving her clout. So she's not getting those criticisms. She's surrounded by people that love her, right? And the criticisms that people. And the criticisms that she is getting is from the right. So if she probably lives in this world where like, oh, the only people that are criticizing the Biden administration, or the only person that are criticizing her, are like privileged people. But that's not. It's not true.
She needs to watch Breakthrough. That's my conclusion from this segment.
I think she should. I think she should watch Breakthrough. And I, you know what? I'll extend an open invitation to her to appear at any given time. We are not discriminating in terms of who we're talking to. Monica Cruz, you're also the host of On the Picket Line, a weekly labor segment here on Breakthrough News. Almost got my last show in there. Nevertheless, I think there's a new On the Picket Line coming out tomorrow. Am I correct about that?
That's right. Yes, I'm covering all workers' stories here in the US and international. Labor news is not something that's really hot and, sexy in the press, and Breakthrough is trying to make it cool. So I'm excited to continue doing this work and covering the stories of workers everywhere.
Right on. Well, thank you, Monica. I appreciate you coming on.
I'm happy to be here. Have a great show, y'all. Thanks.
Well, we're going to keep moving forward here. Of course, take the time, if you will. You can continue to share this show so people who are watching you can be watching us. We've got more to say here. I'm Eugene Perrier here with Rania Halleck, of course, for Breakthrough News. That felt pretty good to say, but we want to turn the page a little bit here. As people know, Rania, certainly as you know, Juan in the booth, although not quite in the booth, but in the makeshift booth today, and myself were in Haiti. In your apartment for sure. But this is what you know about Breakthrough News. We are following public health protocols. We are quarantining. Juan and I, we're not playing around out here. We're being very serious, even though both of us are half vaccinated. So, you got to do the right thing here. Hopefully we can all pull this thing together, even though the government has abandoned us, it seems, certainly at times. But we were in Haiti for the past 8-ish days, got back a couple days ago. Had the chance to see a lot. I mean, Rania, you were following it. You were watching us. I don't know what it looked like from the outside in. I mean, we were just kind of grinding. I mean, it felt like it was 2 hours.
I gotta say, like watching. Obviously, I was following your amazing coverage. Anyone who hasn't had a chance to go listen to the dispatches that you had from Punch Out, which is your daily podcast that became basically like a reportage of your time in Haiti each day. And I highly recommend people go check that out. And obviously the content that you were putting out on Instagram and on Twitter. But of course, I want to hear more. I thought it was amazing that you guys got a chance to go because there was almost no media outlets covering what was happening in Haiti. In fact, when you told me you were going, I was looking to see what coverage there had been. And I think all I saw what I thought was a very uninformative segment from Vice News, which is a whole other story, not very surprising. And then Al Jazeera had a few reports out of there because they just have people all over the world. But for the most part, I haven't seen any coverage from major outlets, or even really progressive and left outlets haven't had a chance to, or maybe have been a little too scared to go to Haiti. So I guess to start off, what I'd like to know, and I'm sure what viewers would like to know, is give us a rundown of like, why did you go? What's happening in Haiti? There's obviously these big protests. What are they about? Just like a kind of brief explainer of that, and we can go from there.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And on the Punch Out, shout out to everyone who listened. Shout out to Marcus, who does a lot of our audio engineering here at Breakthrough, who is working all hours of the night to help us put those special editions together. And yeah, I mean, we went to Haiti because of exactly what you said in a way, Rania, that there is so little coming out about the on the ground reality of Haitian people. And almost all of it that does come out is that sort of, poverty, violence, porn kind of stuff that Vice puts out and other people put out where, there's not a lot of context. They're just dropping in out of nowhere. And it's sort of, it bleeds, it leads kind of coverage more or less. And it doesn't give you much of anything about what's really happening. And all you get is this caricatured view, often, with racist stereotypes about how people are living and what's going on. But that knowing there was this huge popular struggle happening, and in the midst of this, it was obvious that so much was being left out of the story of who the Haitian people were, what was happening on the ground, why were people upset, why were they frustrated. And we wanted to, certainly we had some ideas going in, but we wanted to really be there and to see and to participate in all these different actions, to be able to give the most logical, factual sort of account of this thing that I think it captured people's attention to some degree, because there's a lot of sensational headlines, but which also had not been properly contextualized or explained. So, that's why we went there, to try to bring the message from the ground. And, in 8 days, we saw a lot, went to a few, we were mainly based in Port-au-Prince, but we also had the opportunity to go into some rural areas up north, San Michel area of Haiti, and see what was going on in some of the more backcountry type areas of Haiti as well. We were able to meet with workers who are working in these, sweatshop textile industries that are almost 100% oriented towards the U.S. market, working with big Western multinationals, by the way. We had the opportunity to be a part of these big mass protests. We also we're able to spend some time in some of the popular neighborhoods, the places that are often maligned in the press. We spent some time in Bel Air. We were able to briefly spend some time in La Saline. So we were able to, I think, see a very good, as much as you can in 8 days, breadth and depth of the country. I think we got a very good pulse for what's happening and for the nature of the crisis. And I'll finish here. I mean, really sort of the capsule way to understand the crisis is you've got this president, Jovenel Moïse, who has overstayed his term. Like, his term is over and he's refused to leave. So he's essentially turned into a dictator. He is very embattled in the country, has very little support. These huge mass protests have erupted, but it's hard to dislodge him because he has the unilateral support, certainly of the United States, but also of Canada and many other powerful nations around the world. And so now there's this kind of existential struggle between this dictator who's trying to find a way to hold on to power by hook or by crook, and then this popular movement on the other hand trying to remove him. And there's a lot of different forces involved, but people definitely are united around removing Moïse. And then you also have the context of the sort of collapse of state authority under Jovenel. There's some other people with a similar name as him, so he's often known more by his first name, Jovenel. Other political figures with similar names. And the sort of rise of people who have tried to fill the vacuum of some of the collapse in the state security forces in particular, who are also doing various things. So you've got a titanic struggle for the future of Haiti, and it's really about, at the end of the day, is there going to be a continuation of what certainly the United States has always preferred in Haiti, which are these deeply neoliberal, deeply exploitative governments that don't orient towards the needs of the people there? Or is there going to be a profound break with that sort of, pro-imperialist, hyper-elite, super corrupt style of governance that has waylaid the country so unfortunately over a number of past decades?
Well, so I'm sure any day now the Organization of American States is going to release like a statement of some sort, right? Like denouncing the government or denouncing the leader for refusing to step down as they lie about Bolivia and Venezuela doing those things, but then they won't actually make a statement when a country actually does it because it's in their orbit.
Yeah, I mean, they've actually made a statement in favor of Jovenel.
Really? I did not know this.
Yeah, so the OAS statement, and the OAS statement is very much similar to the statements that the U.S. puts out. And what they'll do is they foreground it in some criticism of the general situation. And they'll say that they're very concerned about the instability in this, that, and the third, and that they urge Jovenel to do this, that, and the third. And they're like, demanding he do whatever. But then they always follow that up by saying, well, what we really want is for there to be elections. But what they mean is elections under the current regime, which has now overstayed its constitutional mandate. And this is actually the exact issue, one of the exact controversies, right? Is that Jovenel has said, I'm going to pursue a constitutional reform, right? So he's junked the old constitution by just overstaying his mandate. He's also dissolved the Supreme Court, basically, and dissolved Congress and rules by decree, has for about a year. And he's saying, well, we're going to have this new constitution and vote on that. Then we're going to have new elections in September. And it's all really just a scheme to solidify the power base of his party, right? Because the Constitution, so almost everyone in Haiti speaks Creole. Very few people read French. The Constitution is written in only French. So they want people to go vote and approve a constitution that many of them cannot understand. On top of that, the elections that would follow that would be governed by these new rules that would obviously be manipulated because it's good, right, to the benefit them. So when they're saying support elections, what they really mean is we support Jovenel, but they're trying to put a little criticism in front of it to make it look as if they are not 100% complicit in the actual circumstances of the country, which of course they are. But you see the same type of statements from the State Department in the United States. And I think it's important that people see through that and understand that no matter what little criticisms they put in there, by calling for elections, what they're really trying to do is solidify the Jovenel regime. And by narrowing the issue to just his need to get control of the security situation, they then lower the bar, right? Because instead of saying like you have to improve the lives of people or whatever to be legitimate, they're just saying if you can make it look a little better in terms of quote unquote crime, then we'll declare you to be a legitimate president, and it'll make it easier for us to endorse these elections. So the OAS is intervening very heavily, thumb on the scale, the same with the State Department here, to try to force through these elections in the fall. Fraudulently, against the will of the people.
with this U.S. meddling, I mean, so a lot of the coverage I've seen in like the mainstream press, if there has been any, has really portrayed the situation as Haiti as just protests against this one leader, but it seems to go a bit deeper, because I saw from some of the footage and interviews that you had done that people are really seeing this leader as an extension of America, as an extension of maybe more than America, maybe Canada as well, but really as like an elitist leadership that is oppressing them in some other way beyond just overstaying the Constitution. So what were the complaints? What are the complaints beyond just he's overstayed his mandate constitutionally? What is it that people on the ground are protesting beyond that?
Well, no, I think that's a good point. And since you brought that up, I mean, maybe I can use some of a clip to help illustrate this that I think also will give people a feel for the energy in these protests. But when some of the things that you're hearing from people, and after it, I'll give some translation, I think gives some sense about the full character of the demonstration. So I don't know, Juan, if we have that composite clip from the protest that we could play real quick.
USA, impérialiste, abat USA, abat USA, abat Joe Biden impérialiste, abat Joe Biden impérialiste, abat Joe Biden impérialiste.
I understood some
well,
words.
yeah. I mean, you get the gist of it in a way, which says that, I mean, the first person was saying, down with U.S. imperialism, down with Joe Biden imperialists, down with Joe Biden imperialists. And I think he snuck in a Jovenel imperialist at the end as well. But, that's the piece. The last person who was speaking was saying essentially Haiti is not for sale. And at the end, calling for revolution. And then in the middle there, what people were chanting is Jovenel is finished. It was a very popular chant there. So you get a sense right there of where people are. I mean, certainly you get a sense of the spirit, but they want Jovenel gone. I mean, that's 100% clear, but they're making a direct connection between the role of U.S. imperialism there, and they're very clear. And many people told us this when we were there in the country, that really the main reason he can stay in power is the support from the United States and from these other important countries. And they're tying that in, I think, very deeply. But the other piece of it is they're upset at Jovenel, not just because he overstayed the power. And this is part of the critique of the United States. They're upset with Jovenel because the situation in the country is so bad. And because they have seen, and this is a movement that really began in 2018. It's had its ups and its downs. And it began around a controversy of this party, the PHTK party, of Jovenel stealing, looting $3 billion of development aid from Venezuela. And so people are making a connection between this rotten regime and, the poor living standards that they have to see, and the fact that he's only in power really because of the support that he's getting from the imperialist abroad. And they're connecting all these three things. And that's very palpable when you're there in the streets and the protests.
And what's the security situation there? Like, I know that there has been violence towards these protests. There's
Mm-hmm.
people have been shot at them. They're not quite sure, like sometimes by who. So what's the security situation? And what was your own security situation as foreign journalists there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the second of the protest on Monday, towards the end, did get broken up with some tear gas. There have been, shootings and beatings and things. This past weekend, there seemed to be less of that, for whatever reason. But there was certainly, some reports of live rounds being shot on Monday at the demonstrations. I haven't confirmed that 100%, but I did see it from some legitimate sources. But certainly it was broken up vis-a-vis tear gas, and there were some pieces like that. So on Sunday, there was very little interference from the state forces. I mean, the number of people on the streets was so overwhelming. I'm not sure how much they could really do. And you can see these images here. This is actually from an area known as the Crossroads of Resistance. And it's called that because this is where like a lot of marches that come from various parts of Port-au-Prince all converge in this Crossroads of Resistance area. And, this is just like one shot you can see here of the thousands of people. And so I would say, in the protest itself, at least on Sunday, it was like, the same kind of militant but festive atmosphere that are in a lot of protests. And on Monday, the same thing, but it did end with a little bit. But there is a lot of thuggery that has come from the police towards demonstrations, especially smaller ones are more likely to get, more brutally repressed. And not just in the main cities, also in the countryside. We heard from people about serious police brutality and serious police repression. And yeah, I mean, it's one element of a complex security situation. I mean, I feel that it's both overplayed and underplayed in sort of the way it's portrayed in the West, right? Like many people told us about they're upset about the security situation. I mean, kidnappings have massively increased. There's a lot more, interpersonal violence and intercommunity violence that's happening in a number of places. And it's, a result.
Kind of things.
I mean, it really is I think that, but that does kind of put it together because you have this sort of terrible neoliberal reality where people are struggling to make it. You have no real social services being provided in a serious way by the government to help people. And then now, because of just the terrible kleptocratic rule, you've had this sort of state apparatus start to wither in so many different ways. And so when that happens, you have people who rise to fill the vacuum. A lot of these so-called gangs are talked about. I would say in a way, it's almost like the way the word tribe is used. I think it's a little more sophisticated than just like a gang in the sense that it's portrayed. But I mean, they're certainly filling a security vacuum, filling a social vacuum.
Right. Well, it's like local armed people who like you turn to for protection almost when there's like a security vacuum. Is that like
some of them are that. Some of them are ex-cops who have like taken some of their former cops and are building their own power centers. And so it's complex. I mean, the police have disintegrated in a way. So you have a core of police that stick with the government, but you also have this group Phantom 509 that is like a dissident police force.
That's a badass name. Jesus.
I think they're trying to send a message for sure.
Yeah.
And they are very much against Jovenel. It's not 100% clear what their agenda is, but they kind of have their own situation. And then you have these community forces, and they are not all created equal. I mean, the largest gang, quote unquote, is controlled by a guy named Barbecue. And there's a lot of controversy around this guy, Barbecue. Now, he's called that because of his reputation for burning things, basically. I mean, there's also something that maybe his father was also involved in the barbecue business. But, as people were telling us,
that's a pretty heavy name,
Bel Air,
Barbecue, yeah.
Well, some of the stories we were told, of burning of houses, burning of people, mutilations, and different pieces like that in the context of this inter-gang warfare. And, when we were in Bel Air, there were a lot of people who were telling us that, they didn't want to speak on camera. They weren't, didn't really necessarily want to be recognized that much. But I say there's a lot of controversy around this guy, Barbecue, because it's not clear exactly like what angle he's playing. I mean, at times it has appeared that he has worked with Jovenel and others and may be sort of in the mix. There's a photo that's circulating online now of him wrapped in an American flag. He, of course, denies that he's working with Jovenel in any way, shape, or form. You know, people on the street in Bel Air were telling us they definitely thought that he was working with Jovenel and trying to create like a strategy of tension and to make things worse. I mean, I think the one thing you can say is that he's an operator and a power player, and he's trying to play a bigger role in the politics of the country, and is probably playing a couple sides, if you want my honest opinion.
An opportunist.
But yeah, I think that
He's
you
an
definitely get a
opportunity, yeah.
sense that there are that's the case. So, you know, it's almost like a power center of its own, but it's not 100% clear. It's a little bit murky. It's hard to tell exactly where it is. But the one thing that you know for absolute certain is there is an increase in violence. There is a lot of this sort of gang warfare. There is a lot of police brutality and violence from the state and from the revived army. And all of that is sort of contributing to a broader sense of what's going on. And it's a serious piece, and I don't think it should be underplayed. But the reason I say sometimes it's overplayed, and here are some photos here from Bel Air, by the way. These are actually like areas that were destroyed in you know, different conflicts that were happening.
That looks like the remnants of after a bombing.
Yeah, I mean, and there was a lot of kind of evidence of serious fighting. And this is what people were telling us here, is that, you know, this was violence that was taken on to intimidate people from coming to protest. And that's something that we heard in different parts of the city, that there is violence used to intimidate people from coming to protest. This is the destruction of people's homes to intimidate them from coming to protest. So, and so it was interesting to see, I think, the scale of a lot of this. And I think that you can see really that it's a sign of how unstable things are in a way, in terms of like who really is going to be in power. And it's a sign of how weak Jovenel is in a way. I mean, you know, and here are just some more pictures of Bel Air, but and some of the aftermath. That top floor is a house that was also burned as well in the context of these conflicts. But, you know, I also say that in a way it can be overplayed in the international media, not because it's not serious, but because it's portrayed as if like everyone is hiding in their homes. And, you know, it's just like a bunch of people running around with machetes on the street, cutting people's throats.
That actually is the way that Haiti is portrayed. That literally, that description right there, people running around with machetes, just like ready to get you, is how Haiti is portrayed in the popular culture.
Exactly. And that is not the case. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't people who might be modifying their behavior because it's more dangerous, but, you know, most people have to go out and try to make a living. And so people are out, they're moving around, they're doing things, they're participating in, you know, the daily commerce such as it is. And I, you know, even things that are oriented towards rich people, the type of people who can hide in their homes. I saw many full parking lots and people out shopping and doing things like that. So it's not that it's not affecting people, but this idea of sort of like that somehow all like life has, you know, ground to a halt and all that kind of stuff is not really exactly right. And I think it misses the context of the violence, which is not really random, right? Like it's predictable. I mean, some of it is hierarchical coming from the state. Some of it is hierarchical coming from these like proto-states on the neighborhood level. And some of it is just survival crimes of people trying to make it in a very tough circumstance. But those things are interrelated, and they're all more deeply related to the actual social conditions of Haiti, which could actually be changed. And that's why the popular movement has also taken up the issue of violence, because people aren't separating that issue from the other issues of what's going on in the country. And I'd say for us, you know, just to answer your last question, you know, I don't think anything super harrowing happened to us, but, you know, we were in, you know, some pretty tough areas. No doubt about that. Some people were definitely armed. You know, it was obvious that there was control in certain areas and that it wasn't a secret that we were there. So I think it was a type of situation where you gotta, you know, keep your head on your shoulders. But you know, I don't think anything, I don't want to be out here like we were out here dodging bullets in some sort of war. I mean, listen, I'm not Brian Williams, okay? I didn't get shot down in a Black Hawk, you know, over the streets of Port-au-Prince. But
funny.
You know, we were really out there in the neighborhoods, and it was very interesting to see in many ways. But I mean, to give you a good example of what I mean, you know, La Saline, where we briefly were, which, you know, has one of the quote unquote worst reputations. And I put this photo on Twitter. there were these like relatively nice houses in the midst of this, I mean, I hate to even call something a slum because I hate what that puts on the people there, but slum-like conditions. And what we learned is that the nicer looking houses were part of a building program by President Aristide, who was the president twice in the early 90s and again later on, and he was cooed out twice by the United States with the support of the United States, that he had tried to improve the housing around that area. Of course, when he was cooed out, that program ended. So you don't have to have this massive, sprawling, slum conditions for where people are living if you don't want. This is a country that generates tens of billions of dollars of wealth every single year, but it's an enforced poverty on people. It's an enforced reality. It's not as if there's some problem with the people. And I think it's often presented as if there's some like congenital issue with Haitians that make them poor and make them violent. And it's not deeply connected.
They just can't have running water because they can't figure it out, is like how it's portrayed.
Right.
And I'm curious though, like when it comes to these protests, what was your sense of like, was there a class dynamic where the people who are protesting, what was their class status? I assume it's not the wealthy of the country. And then if you were to like, you said you visited rural areas as well, was there participation or support in rural areas for this movement?
Yeah. So yeah, as for the protests, I would definitely say the vast majority of people are poor and working people, without a doubt, in the protests. I mean, that's the vast majority of people in Haiti. But definitely that is the base of the protest movement, are the people who are just fed up with the state of affairs. Now, that being said, there are some elements of the elite who are supporting the protests. And Jovenel has been taking that now unbelievably, even though he is the elite of all the elites. He's now saying the protests are a conspiracy of the oligarchs against him.
Yeah, that's a typical go-to though. That's a typical go-to.
It really is. Like so you do see some people who are out there who are from, just because organizations you may know or individuals you talk to. We talked to some former officials from, the Senate, and definitely you see some, there's a political party that is led by a guy named Reginald Boulos, who is one of the worst capitalists in all of Haiti, but he has his beef with Jovenel, so he had his party out there representing. So you do see some of it, but yeah, by and large, the base, the beating heart of the movement is the poor and working people, the popular neighborhoods. Like, why is Bel Air a neighborhood that's been targeted, right? And we showed those photos earlier of the attempt to prevent people from mobilizing by taking down their homes. Well, it's because Bel Air has a very long history of being really one of the most militant neighborhoods against these machinations of all the imperialist pieces. The coup against Aristide in 2004, it was one of the bastions of opposition to the UN occupation. It was one of the hardest hit by the earthquake, but it's close to the presidential palace. And so it's also in a strategic position. And so that really, these popular neighborhoods are definitely the center of it, and definitely the center of the protests. And you definitely see that. And there definitely is a class element to it. Definitely there are leading sectors of the population, the opposition, that are absolutely bourgeois forces, some of the leading sectors. So there's no doubt about that, and I don't want to sort of play that down. But in terms of who is showing up and who is really a part of the numbers there, it's poor and working people 100%. And most of the elites, I would say, are backing the PHTK party and are backing, and you can see this young man with a sign that says "Down with Capitalism, Viva Socialism." And he was agitated. Some people have tried to say online that we planted this kid with this sign. And I can tell you right now,
he's got some resources, I gotta say. You guys are like planting protesters and staging protest signs. That's commitment.
Yeah, well, the oligarchs.
The oligarchs, yeah.
But this kid, I have to say, was one of the most militant people who was out there. I saw this kid like 8 different times in the protest, running around and where action was happening. So definitely he is not some kid who was planted. He was not getting paid by anyone to be out there. There are accusations that the protesters are paid. Let me tell you, no, definitely that was not the case. This kid was very militant out in the streets. And, Haiti is a very young country, so the protests are also very young. I mean, I would say like the bulk of the protests, hundreds of thousands of people, is like people below the age of 30. Not that you don't see all ages. I mean, I saw a lot of like grandmothers out there, people with canes, plains, I'm telling you, in 90-degree heat out there marching. It was amazing to see. But it's also a lot of good, strong youth energy in the context of what we were seeing in the protest there. So yeah, I do think the class element is palpable in Haiti. There's no doubt about that. And the agenda of the PHTK government. The countryside that you asked about, we were able to go out to the countryside. Now, of course, the majority of the country is rural, right? Like Port-au-Prince is the main city. There are some other cities, but, Port-au-Prince is a real metropolis, but the country is very rural. Still, the vast majority of people make their income, they say. Statistics are a little so-so sometimes, but make their income off of subsistence agriculture. So it's a big piece. We were able to get out here, and you can see this is footage from a farm in Saint Michel that has been seized. This land was being worked by a women's peasant cooperative that was cooperatively working the land with sustainable agriculture. And it was focused around building food sovereignty for Haiti, because most of the food production is for export or subsistence. And so there are a lot of issues with hunger. And so this land was seized by the government. It was given over to a guy named Andy Apade, who's probably the biggest capitalist in Haiti. He's actually a U.S. citizen, believe it or not, because he was born in the United States. So he is of Haitian parentage, but he's also a U.S. citizen. But he's big time business person in the textile industry. Now he's moving into agriculture, and they're going to take this land to grow stevia, the sweetener for Coca-Cola. He has
That's
a contract
not even
with
good.
Coca-Cola.
Okay, that's like, there's like something even worse about what you just said, because stevia is disgusting. Like, not that it's okay, not that it's okay if it's something that tastes good, but that there's just like an extra, extra layer there. What?
Stevia is gross.
No, I know.
It is disgusting, right? Like, I like
well, and that was Juan's disembodied voice. But as Juan pointed out very well when we were there on the land, it's connected to this whole ridiculous craze of like Coke is going to be more healthy for you because we're using like stevia instead of regular sugar. So it's all part of their
Coke is evil. Coke is just
Psy war is happening.
So that's
this is one piece of the land. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I liked what you were saying earlier, and I'd like you to expand on it a bit. Is how Haiti is actually a very resource-rich country. It's just like used as basically like a sweatshop for America, and it's imposed on it with these like corrupt neoliberal regimes over and over again, like indefinitely, it feels like. So I guess I'm wondering, is there a socialist, any sort of anti-capitalist movement in Haiti? I mean, there's some people saying down with imperialism. There's that guy holding the anti-capitalist sign. Did you meet communists or socialists who are trying to organize in that fashion?
Yeah, well, and real quick on the riches. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of gold as well in Haiti, which a lot of people don't know about. Canadian companies in the forefront of that. It's unexploited, but there is a lot of gas reserves there as well. And yes, the sort of sweatshop economy is big. And after the earthquake, this was one of the things that the Clintons brought in, and this was the tag team, Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State and Bill Clinton from the Clinton Global Initiative, billions of dollars, no real evidence of what any of that money did when you're in Haiti. I mean, anyone who's old enough to remember the earthquake, like I can certainly remember, you can probably remember, Rania, there were so many commercials on TV, you know what I'm saying? And there was so much money being raised. These billions of dollars,
where'd it go?
I mean, it had to have been stolen. I mean, it's honestly
it was just
stunning.
Like payouts. It was a way to make money.
And so one of the big things they did is they set up this new Caracol industrial parks. They could start to expand the working of sweatshops. So it's textiles, which are big. There's also parts that are made for elements of the military industrial complex.
That was what the aid after the earthquake from the Clinton Foundation was used to build?
That's what some of the U.S. government money was used to build, but yes,
Wow.
also the Clinton Foundation. I mean, allegedly they did some other stuff, but like, you can see the impact of the industrial parks. I don't see the impact of the so-called houses they were building and all this other stuff. You don't see that. But yeah, it was a big expansion of that. So it's textiles. It's also some small parts for the military industrial complex. And now they're starting to try to produce more and this is a photo, by the way, these are workers here from a union in Sonapi, which is one of the large industrial parks. And just to give you a sense of the repression, this meeting that they had here, they said if we had not been there having a meeting like that near where they work, they would have all been arrested, despite the fact that you allegedly have the right to organize in Haiti, that they would not have been there. And there was, some stool pigeon type character who came around, and we had to end the meeting a little earlier than we wanted because obviously they were trying to intimidate people in a major way. And that was one of the things they told us. And one of the things they pointed out, these workers, is that the HOPE Act, and that's what governs tariff-free access for goods coming from these industrial parks into the United States. The woman you can see kind of there in the center, sort of, I guess, second from my right, is their spokesperson. And she told us that, the HOPE Act doesn't do anything for us. It just makes our condition worse because it empowers these sweatshop companies to come out and to, set up shop in Haiti. And they're not from Haiti, right? I mean, they're contracting out a lot of times with these Haitian companies, but it's mainly these multinationals. They're getting the cheap labor, and then they can import it to the United States tariff-free so they can make more profits. And that's what ultimately results in their working conditions. There's no overtime. There is no public transportation in Haiti at all, another example of neoliberalism. So people have to spend a huge amount of their money on transportation. The health situation is terrible in these plants in every way. But anyway, I just say that just to say that, this aftermath of the earthquake was this big expansion of this sweatshop economy. And that's becoming a bigger part of the dreams of these others. But, that was just sort of an aside on your other question about the socialist piece. But
it's a capitalist police state is what it is. And before you go to what you're about to say, I just want to remind everyone of the role that the Clintons played in preventing preventing an increase in the minimum wage in Haiti. Anyways, continue. So I want to give them credit where it's due. A shout out to the Clintons.
No. I believe it was to increase the minimum wage to $5 a day.
It was like absurd. It was like from $2.50 or something to $5, right?
It was. I believe that was what it was. It was terrible.
It prevented that increase, probably to help women and girls or something, I'm sure. That's like we're always talking about women and girls.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry, you were about to, I think, speak to the issue of socialist organizing, I think, is where maybe I'm making you go there if you weren't. Okay.
Well, I'm happy to go where you lead me. I have utmost confidence in your interview capabilities. I mean, we did meet socialist and communist forces. I mean, I would say this is a banner from one of the socialist parties, Raison Qu'on Peuple, there, and that was very active in the protest there on Sunday and Monday. I would say the left is obviously not the leading force in Haiti. If it was the leading force, we wouldn't be talking about this right now because they'd already be solving all their problems. But, the left is and the socialist movement is very well implanted in the peasant struggle, some of the largest peasant organizations. In the student struggle, we were able to attend a socialist meeting at the State University, like 120 people in the room. We were able to talk with, some popular organizations, women's organizations in some of the working class and poor neighborhoods that operate schools and community centers, as well as sort of advocating for more rights for women to succeed, or to be able to have more sustainability in terms of economic opportunity, especially vis-a-vis their own independence and the relationship between economic opportunity and domestic violence. So a lot of very interesting struggles that are being led by socialists and that socialists are very involved in. And, I think that in the context of the opposition movement, some of the larger organizations tend to be, and here's us meeting with Combit Femsage, which is the women's organization I just mentioned, 3-4 of their leaders here, who we also then saw at the protest on Sunday and Monday, which, again, shows how deeply embedded they are. So I would say, the left is present. And certainly there is an anti-imperialist consciousness in the demonstrations. Socialist chants do get picked up. People have a sense, from Cuba, from Venezuela, of, what the sort of rising tide of left governments, and that's in the school where we were having that meeting. It's a school/community center, this picture of Che. I would say that, most of the socialists we met said it's an uphill climb, that there are a lot of challenges, but they're certainly in the game. I mean, when you see the big banners that advertise the protests, you see like the sort of more bourgeois opposition groups, and you see some of the socialist groups involved. So, they're definitely playing a role. They're definitely playing a visible role. I don't think that the left is at all outside of the political conversation. I think they're very much in the political conversation with a role to play. But I think there's a lot to go in terms of building it. But I think it's a hopeful movement in the context of the rising tide of the left in Latin America right now, sort of the rolling, the renewed element of the pink tide. I think you see some opportunities there for left-wing forces in Haiti to emerge, especially because the conversation around imperialism, which was pretty pervasive in the demonstrations itself, raises serious questions about a post-PHTK government. There are many people who are involved in the opposition sort of leadership who wouldn't want to change that much at all, right? But I think there are many people who recognize that the problems that exist in Haiti require deeper change. And I think the socialist political forces that have, a real analysis of not only the international relationship of forces, but as they kept stressing to us, the importance of international solidarity with poor and working people around the world, especially in the United States, to try to change the political circumstances for Haiti and make it possible for them to do more without coups and interventions, I think is an important conversation, and that it answers a lot of questions that a lot of people are going to have about a post-PHTK government. So, I mean, we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I do think that we definitely met socialists and communists all over the place. They're definitely embedded in the popular struggle. I think there's certainly a lot of interesting fault lines there that could potentially favor them.
And I know that we're like running a little short on time here, but I think this is an important thing to speak to real quick before we finish with this conversation. Is what is the relationship between, me and you were talking about this a few days ago. What's the relationship between countries like Haiti and then other countries in the region? What are its biggest allies? Is it allied closely, this U.S.-backed government, with other U.S.-backed governments? Or is there space for Haiti to have a relationship with governments like Cuba and Venezuela?
It's kind of a mix. I mean, Jovenel is definitely savvy and is playing all the geopolitical cards, not all of them, but a lot of them, to be ideologically useful to the West, not just economically useful, if you will. So, for instance, the Jovenel government supports Juan Guaido ridiculously. But I guess, one unrepresentative government to another totally fake government, maybe it makes more sense than you think. But nevertheless, they've played a big role, and most Caribbean nations are against Guaido. So the CARICOM countries, which is the Caribbean community countries, are against Guaido and are against the unilateral presidency. They support a transition. They support basically the dialogue track that the Maduro government, some elements of the opposition, and also other countries, obviously former Prime Minister Zapatero, but also many countries in CARICOM have played a big role in trying to mediate the dispute between the PSUV government and the opposition in Venezuela. So that's their position, is a very pro-negotiations, pro-democracy position. Haiti's very out of step with that. That's very useful for the United States, because if not, then all of basically the Black Caribbean governments would be 100% against U.S. policy as it concerns Venezuela, and that obviously would not look good. So that it means a lot for them. Cuba, it's a little bit different. I mean, I'd say Jovenel is cool towards Cuba, where many of the past governments have been, openly very positive, but Jovenel has not ended the extensive cooperation Cuba has in Haiti. Cuba, as they do with many countries around the world, plays a big role in the Haitian healthcare sector, both from the point of view of Cuban doctors and the Cuban medical mission and the training of Haitian doctors in the Latin American School of Medicine. This goes back, well into the 1990s. There are also other forms of cooperation in education, in sports and things like that. And this is something that Cuba offers to many other Caribbean nations, certainly many nations around the world. So it's not that rare for Cuba, but it's something that even these sort of far right governments in Haiti can't really afford to break with, because it really is in many ways a lifeline for services that they've chosen not to provide or build up. And so Cuba, which is a very open country to working with anyone who needs help, has, I would say, a complicated relationship with Haiti in a way. They're not really friendly with the Jovenel regime, but they still, have these programs and are very happy to offer them. And they are not going to pull out their aid just because, they don't have a great relationship with the head of state. They have a more principled attitude towards what they're doing there. But definitely, I would say Jovenel has not been favorable to Cuba. And I definitely think that it has helped the U.S. to have his voice be kind of out of the game, where in the past, Rene Preval and others, they would speak up on Cuba's behalf. So again, it plays a big geopolitical role. But yes, they're close to Colombia, as well, which is obviously a close U.S. ally.
It's a little surprising that that his government wouldn't do what a lot of other right-wing Latin American governments do, which is like use Cuba as the boogeyman. Like, right, like the Cubans are behind the like they didn't blame the Cubans for the protests, like for example,
the Castro Chavismo. No, they did not. I think part of it is that there isn't the same. I mean, there's a long history of anti-communism because the Duvalier regime was very anti-communist, but I don't think it has as potent of an impact, because the sort of nature of Cuban cooperation has built a very positive view. Like many of these other countries that have that level of demonization don't have anything like the level of cooperation with the Cubans that Haiti has had traditionally, the level of training that Haitians have had from Cuba traditionally under multiple governments. So you have more people who I think have just had a very positive impact. And I think that kind of messaging is not as effective. And I think it's also, obviously the standard of living in Cuba is higher than in Haiti. There's more rich people in Haiti in a way, but sort of the average standard of living. And so I think it's also, in a way, it's a difficult dichotomy to make because of, I think, the reality of people knowing what's really going on in Cuba. So there's close relations between the two peoples as well. And I think that plays a role. But yeah, I would say absolutely, that is probably one of the biggest fears of the US in a way, is exactly that, is that it's hard to predict if, if you think the last most popular government was President Aristide, and he did have a positive attitude towards Cuba and did have a positive attitude towards the Chavez government in Venezuela, and did want to put in some developmentalist program and try to improve education, healthcare, and infrastructure, that it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to say Haiti could have another government like that, even if it wasn't like super, super radical. And thus, Jovenel is to them sort of the best case scenario, because it could easily get out of hand and they could easily slip more into the orbit of the pink tide countries. I don't think that in any way, shape, or form is strange.
And I guess like what, I assume you've got more content about Haiti coming out in the coming days or weeks. What do you got planned? You don't have to go into too much detail, but what can people look forward to?
We'll keep it a little bit of a surprise, but we have more coming. I mean, we were able to take a lot more footage than we were able to really like upload and bring back. So what we're going to really try to do is take some of the stories that we heard and kind of use that coverage and narrativize them and produce some segments that help bring out the voices of people we met and also help explain the situation there on the ground. So sort of everything I talked about, from the union workers to the struggle in the countryside to what it was like there at those protests. We're going to be producing more sort of background contextual pieces with that footage for people to see what's happening there on the ground. And, we're going to try to keep covering it, closely and bringing people unique things. We have to give a huge thanks to the folks at Radio Resistance down in Haiti, who are a progressive media collective there, doing great work on the radio and also now doing work with film and others that did a lot to assist us and help us get around the country and see things. And we're excited about some of those relationships, being able to keep bringing people stuff that is from the ground on Haiti and also produced by people on the ground in Haiti who are progressive people trying to make a change and trying to make a difference and very interested in the struggle here, as well as telling people about the struggle there. So I think think you can expect more from this 8-day trip, but I think you can also expect that we're going to be staying on top of this as we move forward and looking in more to some of these issues, like people like this guy, Andy Apade, stealing this land and, working with Coca-Cola. These people are tied in with the United States, and we're going to be looking into, that end of things as well and trying to expose more of what's going on in terms of this collaboration between the U.S. government and these multinationals, to the detriment of the Haitian people.
That was like lovely, and I keep adding more, but I just want you to get your take on one more thing. Is like, why should people care? Like, why should people care about what's happening in Haiti? Why does an American,
well, I think,
why?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, like, it's being done in your name. So, I mean, if you think it's bad that people are living in slum-like conditions, working in sweatshops, being forced to immigrate from their country by the millions because there's no way to survive amidst the poverty, hunger, food insecurity, and so on and so forth. Well, I mean, you can act like you're not complicit, but the reality is the U.S. government is using your name and laundering its own actions in your name. And I think it's important to speak up against things that are being done that are wrong to other people, in general, but certainly, if it's being done over the wishes of what you would prefer not to see. So I'd say, that's one piece. I would say two, listen, I generally think that poor and working class people all around the world tend to have more in common with each other than they do with these super rich people. Now, there's some big differences between Haiti and the United States. And, even in some of the worst parts of the United States, there are many more advantages than what people have in Haiti in some ways, but not in others, but certainly in many ways. But at the same time, it's the same people. Like, people who are struggling here in the United States, whether they have it somewhat better or significantly better even than people in Haiti. People who are struggling here in the United States are struggling because of the same super rich, wealthy elites that want to keep as much money as possible and give you as much money as little as they can. And it's the same principle operating abroad. They want to exploit the Haitian people as much as they possibly can to get as much as they possibly can out of them. And the reality is to live on this earth in a sustainable, equitable way in the future. Obviously, there has to be less of this kind of predatory capitalism, dog eats dog, anything goes for profit. And I think that the only people whose interest that there are to make those kind of moves is the interest of people who are struggling amidst plenty and who are wondering why the system is tilted so far against them, seemingly so unnecessarily. Those people in the United States, those people in Haiti, those people in the Philippines, those people in Africa, those people in Europe have to come together in a bigger way if we're going to solve those problems, because the economy and everything is worldwide now, and it can't just be isolated from one place. And it's the same people who have this race to the bottom, oppressive, exploitive mentality in order to have the same result happen as the mass majority of wealth flows to the top 1% of people in the world, and everyone else, maybe they're not all at the same level, but they're all getting the crumbs rolling downhill.
Well, I think what's important about what you're saying is they're working together. The people doing the oppressing are all working together. So it's like only makes sense for
people got to unite.
People who are being oppressed to be working together, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's in Haiti, whether it's in the Philippines, whether it's in the Middle East.
And this is the message
they're able to
unite.
So
we should be too. And this is the message from people there. I mean, people, I don't even think we had this one. I don't even want to put Juan on the spot, but he did catch this great video of this mural of George Floyd that we found in Port-au-Prince. And, people were referencing the uprising here to us. They were referencing what happened to George Floyd in relationship to their own struggle. They were very interested in, like, they were making calls to the American people, not because they hate people in America, not because they think they're terrible, but because they think people in America can do something. And we kept asking people, what do you really want us to emphasize when we go back to an American audience? And the thing that people kept saying they wanted us to emphasize was, work to do something about the U.S. government supporting Jovenel. But you wouldn't say that unless you had some belief that, these people are also they probably aren't for this either. And we got to talk to them and get them knowing about it and mobilize them. And we know from the struggles that we see people wage that it can be done. And so I think that in and of itself is a powerful statement about the struggle here, that people in Haiti see some level of hope, that things can change in the United States too. Like they aren't just saying, you know, okay, we hate the United States. They're saying, yeah, we want to reach out to people in the United States and let them know what's going on and try to get them into the streets and mobilizing as well. But they're hopeful that that can happen. And we were very well received so many places, I have to say, because people were so eager to have the opportunity to tell their story to a US audience, because they feel so shut out of the international conversation. They feel totally isolated. I would say maybe the only similar country to me is like Yemen. Well, there's a couple like this. Also, like, you know, Swaziland, which a lot of people don't know, but where there's a brutal struggle against poor people there. Coca-Cola also involved. You know, smaller countries that are just totally victimized by imperialism with no real voice coming out. And people were just like ready to speak to the people of the United States and ready to make this peace. So anyway, I'm just rambling now.
No, but
I do
you're
think
right.
that's
There
important.
is a certain power in, like, that you see that people in countries that are oppressed by U.S. imperialism see in U.S. citizens, and when they see a U.S. citizen wanting to listen to what they're saying, they're just like, do something, like make your government stop. Like that's how they see it, and that's an accurate interpretation in many ways, because we live in the belly of the beast, right? Where we do have some sort of power collectively. And I think that what you said is so important, and actually like a really beautiful way to end this particular conversation about Haiti. And I really look forward to the stuff you're going to be putting out about it in the coming weeks.
Well, I appreciate that. I look forward to it. I also look forward to everything you are going to be putting out, Rania Khalek. I am so happy to have you here on Breakthrough News. I mean, I'll just say, as we always say, that we are brought to you by you. So if you get the opportunity, if you have the means, go to patreon.com/breakthrough news. It's patreon.com/breakthrough news. Become a patron, support us financially. If you like what we did in Haiti and you want to see more of that, if you're excited that we have Rania on here, and don't forget, go to our Twitter page and you know, tell us some of the things you might like to see you know, her work on. But you know, that is all good. The more that you can help us, the more that we can do, and the more great news we can bring you on the ground, in the studio, wherever we are, in a number of different things. So patreon.com/breakthrough news. That is going to bring us to the end of the Freedom Side here tonight, April 1st, April Fool's Day. We didn't do any jokes here. We did some jokes in the beginning, but we didn't do anything fake. But nevertheless, happy April to everybody. Thanks everyone for watching. Big shout out to everyone who supported everything that we did while we were there in Haiti. Really just appreciate all the support from everyone and sharing what we did. And big shout out to everyone in the Breakthrough News team who really worked hard to make it possible for us to do this. And once again, welcome, Rania. Very, very happy to have you
so good to
with
be
us. Indeed.
Couldn't
Well,
be
we will
happier.
see you again next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, as always, on the Freedom Side.